So I was browsing Pinterest the other day for some ideas for my next project, and I came across something that I thought was pretty cool. It was a small jungle paludarium, and I'm going to make one in a custom aquarium. I'll start by cutting a few pieces of glass that are 1/8 of an inch thick. I started by marking where to cut. I then lined up a ruler and used my glass cutter to cut the glass. The dimensions I'm using for the aquarium are 14 inches long, 11 inches deep, and 4 inches high. After scoring the glass, I snapped it in half. I had to cut a few duplicate pieces as the front and back are the same, as well as the sides. Now that all the glass is cut, it's time to assemble the tank. The first thing I'll do is tape up all the glass pieces so I get clean lines of silicone. For an aquarium this size, I left about 1/4 of an inch gap between the glass and the tape. I applied tape to the bottom and all 4 sides, again leaving about 1/4 of an inch gap. With all the pieces taped up, I wiped down the exposed glass with isopropyl alcohol. This will clear all debris and make the silicone adhere better. I then applied silicone to the bottom sheet of glass. I'm assembling this on cardboard so I can easily remove it later. After putting silicone on the bottom sheet, I folded the sides up and held them in place with more tape. I then applied silicone on the inside corners and smoothed it out with my finger. I took off the tape and let everything cure overnight, and then I removed the cardboard from the bottom. Like I said, I did this on cardboard so it would be easier to remove. If I did this on the table, it would have stuck to it, and it would have been a pain to get off. Anyway, I scraped off all the excess silicone and sanded the sides with wet sandpaper. It was here that I realized I made a big mistake. I forgot to add silicone in between the glass panels on the edges. So I added some, wiped away the excess silicone, and used some more tape to hold it in place. If I were to use the tank as is, it would crack. To fix this, I'll use some EVA foam and put it along the bottom. I lined it up in the corner and cut the rest to size. With that addressed, it's time to add the substrate. I'll be using Aqua Natural Sugar White Sand. This is a brand that I've been using for a little while now, and I really love their substrate. Anyway, I poured it into the tank and sloped it towards the back to create depth. Now it's time to scape it using some Cereus stone. Normally I would put something like egg crate light diffuser along the bottom of the tank to evenly distribute the weight of the stones, but I didn't have any at the time, and this was the next best option. One of the things I tried to keep in mind while scaping this is that there's going to be a lot of riparian growth. This means that the plant's roots will be in water while their leaves are above. I had to leave gaps in between the stones so that I could easily place plants there. A few of them may be above the water line, but I'll counteract that with some sphagnum moss. My idea for the scape was to create a tropical riverbank. I wanted to have the stones get smaller as they transition into the water, as well as the plants. I didn't add a filter or anything, as it's very small, and I don't know if there's going to be anything living in it at some point. I might end up adding something like some snails or cherry shrimp, but that's for the future. I'm not quite sure what kind of animals are suitable for this, so if you have any ideas, please let me know down in the comments. After scaping for around an hour, I got something that I was pretty happy with. It's exactly what I described, and I'm very happy with the result. Next thing I need to do is prepare the plants. I started by removing them from their pots and then breaking up the roots from the soil. Like I said earlier, I'm using mostly riparian plants. I'll also be using some aquatic and non-aquatic moss later in the video. Once I was done breaking up the soil from the roots, I took them all outside and hosed them down to remove any extra dirt. After thoroughly cleaning out all their roots, I started to add them to the scape. Like I said earlier, I want the scape and the plants to slowly start to get smaller as they transition into the water. I made sure that the biggest ones were in the back and the smallest ones were in the front. Some of the plants I use include palms, calathea, ferns, and a few pieces of ivy. Traditionally, I like to add pops of color to my tanks, but with the vibe and aesthetic I wanted with this one, it just didn't make sense. However, there's still a large variety between the shape, texture, and color of the leaves. The calathea in the back right has a little bit of neon yellow in it, and some of the plants up front have a little bit of purple or white. Like I said, I didn't want to add too much color, so I ended up removing these purple waffle plants. I also really like the idea of having some of the plants vining out the sides. This is where the ivy came in. I wanted this to have a sort of jungle vibe to it, so I made sure to make it dense. Like I said earlier, some of the plants like the rabbit's foot fern in the back are above the waterline. I'll add some wet sphagnum moss to counteract this. With the plants added, I'm absolutely loving the way it's looking. It'll look even better with some moss though. I added the moss to most of the gaps in between the rocks. I won't add any of this moss to the water feature, as I was finally able to get some Java moss, so I'll use that for it instead. I also added a few smaller pieces of ivy to soften things up a bit. Now that all the moss is added, I can start to fill the tank up with water. I should mention that before scaping or adding substrate or any of this, I did a water test to make sure this holds water. Now that the water's in place, I can start to add the aquatic plants. Nothing crazy here, just a few smaller plants. I added some in between and next to some of the rocks. I love the way the aquatic plants look. I sometimes decide whether I should add them or not, and for this particular build, I think it was a wise decision to add them. They add a lot of color and texture to the water area. Like I mentioned earlier, I'll add some Java moss to the water feature. The reason I don't use Java moss too much is because my local fish store is usually out of it, and it takes about 3 weeks to get it ordered. Sometimes with these projects I need them sooner than that, so it just doesn't work out. Anyway, with the plants and moss added to the water feature, that completes the build. I don't know about you guys, but I'm absolutely in love with this build. The lush jungle vibe that it has is just amazing. I think this is definitely some of my best work yet. Let me know what you think about it down in the comments. I do think it would be awesome to have something like cherry shrimp down in the water feature. I don't really know too much about them or how to care for them, so maybe I'll look into that. I still think it looks amazing either way, and trust me when I tell you that the pictures do not do it justice. I didn't mention anything about lighting, as I'm still using a temporary one while I wait on the permanent one. I also want to say that as of editing this, we're 6 subscribers away from 500. I'm very thankful for each and every one of you, and I can't thank you enough for your support. Although 500 is barely anything on YouTube, it's still an early milestone. Anyway, that's going to do it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. I'll see you in the next one.